December 22, 1944. 11:30 a.m. Bastogne, Belgium. The frozen air misted with every breath as Lieutenant Colonel Harry Card observed 4 German officers making their way through the snow. Their white banner was strikingly visible against the ruined terrain. The officers brought with them a proclamation destined to be remembered, an ultimatum insisting on surrender and steeped in the arrogance of assured triumph. The fortunes of battle were shifting. Now, American troops in and around Bastogne faced encirclement by formidable German armored units. There remained but a single option to prevent the surrounded American soldiers from utter destruction. That was the honorable capitulation of the beleaguered town. The German delegation stood waiting, exuding absolute assurance. They had strong reasons for their confidence. 18,000 American soldiers were hemmed in, encircled by roughly 30,000 German troops equipped with hundreds of tanks. Supplies could not be delivered. Adverse weather prevented any Allied aircraft from taking off. The closest Allied relief forces were over 100 miles away. What the Germans did not realize was that 130 miles further south, General George S. Patton had just given his word in a manner so bold that even Eisenhower suspected he was being facetious. This vow called for relocating an entire army through insurmountable winter conditions at a speed never before seen in military maneuvers. The calculations of warfare were soon to change, not through superior numbers or weaponry, but from the interplay between German hubris and American resolve, as well as the incredible boldness of a general who refused to accept the concept of impossibility. This process of transformation started 6 days prior amid the gloom of the pre-dawn hours on December 16, 1944. Right at 5:30 a.m., the Ardennes forest erupted with a savagery not witnessed on the Western Front since 1940. 1,600 German artillery guns unleashed their barrage simultaneously over an 80-mile stretch, their shots piercing the frigid air at unsuspecting American troops. Included among those on the receiving end was Private First Class Robert Leckie of the 99th Infantry Division, who would later write in his journal, "The ground trembled beneath us. Trees burst apart into fragments. The air itself shrieked. They told us the Germans were finished. They told us wrong." This marked the launch of Operation Wacht am Rhein, the Watch on the Rhine, a final, frantic gambit from Hitler to turn the tide of war. With meticulous secrecy, the Wehrmacht gathered 410,000 men, 1,400 tanks and assault guns, and 2,600 artillery pieces. This enormous force marched through the thick Eifel woods at night, maintained strict radio silence, and relied on horses for supplies to avoid revealing their movement by motor noise. General Major Heinz Kokott, leader of the 26th Volksgrenadier Division, documented the moments before the offensive commenced. Soldiers remained speechless in the night, their breath freezing in puffs in front of them. They understood the stakes. This was no mere operation, this was our last opportunity. The focus was the most vulnerable segment of the Allied front. 4 American divisions, lightly manned and spread over rugged ground. A great many were new to the battlefield or recuperating from prior engagements. The Germans managed to achieve absolute tactical surprise. In just hours, entire American formations were overwhelmed or fleeing in confusion. However, the German scheme was heavily reliant on one element: speed. Seizing the key crossroads at Bastogne within 2 days was essential. 7 major roads converged there, roads that German armor needed to reach the final target, the port of Antwerp, 125 miles away. Should Bastogne remain unconquered, the German push would grind to a halt. General der Panzertruppen Heinrich Freiherr von Luttwitz led the 47th Panzer Corps assigned with capturing Bastogne. His command was formidable. The renowned 2nd Panzer Division fielding 88 tanks and assault guns, the battle-hardened Panzer-Lehr Division with 57 tanks, and the 26th Volksgrenadier Division mustering 17,000 infantry. Racing for the same crossroads from another direction was the 101st Airborne Division, known as the Screaming Eagles. Stationed in Reims, France, they were recovering from 72 days of combat in Holland when they got the urgent call. No winter gear, no chance for thorough preparation. Merely seize your arms and board the trucks. On December 17 at 9 p.m., as temperatures fell to 14 degrees Fahrenheit, the initial trucks of the 101st Airborne set out through the night towards Bastogne. Private Donald Burgett of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment recalled the journey in detail. We moved past endless lines of American soldiers withdrawing in the opposite direction, retreating. Some did not even have weapons. Many went without helmets. They yelled to us from the shadows, "Turn back! Turn back! You'll all be killed." One soldier, his eyes wild with fright, gripped my arm and declared, "There are thousands of them. Tigers, panthers, the lot." I brushed him aside. Retreat was not an option for us. The convoy extended for miles. 380 trucks ferried the division through darkness. They had no clue what they were about to face. Maps were in short supply. Intelligence reports conflicted. All they understood was their mission: reach Bastogne before the Germans got there. The 101st Airborne Division maintained a combat-effective total of 85 officers and 11,035 enlisted men, making a combined strength of 11,840 personnel. This force comprised 4 infantry regiments: the 5,001st, 5,002nd, and 56th Parachute Infantry Regiments, together with the 327th Glider Infantry Regiment, as well as 4 battalions of artillery and several supporting elements. Advance units from the 501st Parachute Infantry Regiment arrived in Bastogne at 11:30 p.m. on December 18. They succeeded in getting there just hours before the main body of German troops. Team de Suber, a combat unit drawn from the 10th Armored Division under the command of Major William Desaberry, had already established a blockage on the road at November, situated 3 miles to the north of Bastogne. At sunrise on December 19, they made initial contact with the forward edge of the German assault. Sergeant William McCloskey, who was a tank commander belonging to Team Dory, recalled those first moments. The fog was so dense that visibility was less than 50 yards. Then we heard it, the deep growl of German tanks approaching. As the first Panther tank appeared out of the fog, it looked like a giant beast. When we fired our 75mm shells at its frontal plating, they deflected as if they were ping-pong balls. We had no choice but to let them advance to a dangerously short distance before we could hit their sides. Fighting for Noble persisted throughout the day. Team de Surrey, with a mere 15 Sherman tanks, confronted the entire 2nd Panzer Division head-on. They managed to hold out for 48 hours and succeeded in knocking out 31 German tanks before receiving orders to fall back. Major Desry sustained grave injuries when a German shell struck his command headquarters, but his efforts had bought invaluable time. On December 20, Bastogne received a new commander. Brigadier General Anthony Clement McAuliffe came to assume interim leadership of the 101st Airborne, filling in while Maxwell Taylor was away in Washington. Trained as an artillery officer, McAuliffe was recognized for his steady nerves when under pressure. He would require every bit of that steadiness in the days that followed. The situation map posted in McAuliffe's headquarters painted a bleak picture. German troops were pressing in from 3 different directions. The 26th Volk Grenadier Division was filtering in from both the south and the east. Panzer Lehr was advancing from the eastern side. Parts of the 2nd Panzer Division were posing threats to the north. By midday on December 20, the last road that led into Bastogne, the highway to Neufchâteau, was severed. Captain Richard Winters of the Easy Company, 506 PIR, stationed his troops in foxholes along the defensive ring. We could detect the rumble of German tanks shifting in the darkness past our outposts. The men kept making their foxholes deeper, using helmets and bare hands to dig when their entrenching tools broke on the frozen earth. The temperature hovered near freezing. Signs of frostbite were already appearing, with men's feet turning black. Within Bastogne, the town's 3,000 civilians crowded in cellars while German artillery methodically targeted the buildings. Renée Lamé-Mer, a Belgian nurse aged 30, devoted herself around the clock at the aid post on Runos Chateau, tending both American and German casualties. She would ultimately not survive the siege. The defending force inside Bastogne now totaled close to 18,000 troops. Included were the 101st Airborne's 11,840 men. Combat Command B of the 10th Armored Division, commanded by Colonel William Roberts, with around 40 functioning tanks and 2,800 soldiers. The 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion fielding M18 Hellcats, the All-African American 969th Artillery Battalion, and several other artillery and support groups. On December 21st, the day began with visibility under 100 yards. Dense fog and falling snow merged, forming a blanket so thick that almost no movement could occur. According to the U.S. Army Meteorological Report, the environment was declared extremely unfavorable for any military activity. For the Germans, such conditions were a blessing. The Allied fighter bombers, which had menaced German forces since D-Day, were forced out of the skies. Oberst-Leutnant von Lau, who led parts of the 2nd Panzer Division, observed, "The weather works in our favor. Without aircraft, the Americans are simply infantry like ourselves, and our tank count surpasses theirs." However, the weather posed problems for both sides. German armor found itself bogged down in the mud resulting from the repeated cycles of thaw and freeze. Vehicles burned through twice as much fuel as usual due to the treacherous terrain. Supply vehicles lost control and spun out on slippery highways. Wounded soldiers perished from exposure before help could reach them. Within Bastogne's defenses, ammunition had become alarmingly scarce. Artillery crews were limited to 10 shells per weapon each day. Most medical resources were spent after the medical company was seized on December 19. Morphine had to be held back for only the gravest cases. Food supplies dropped until only a single daily ration remained. Private First Class James Sims of the 101st would later recall, "To get water, we ate snow. The man beside me in our foxhole had his boots frozen to his feet. When a medic at last removed them, his toes detached too. He showed no reaction. He was past feeling any pain." 130 miles south of Bastogne, at Verdun, a completely different situation was in progress on December 19. Inside a chilly, damp French dormitory heated by one pot-bellied stove, Supreme Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower convened an urgent meeting with his highest-ranking officers. The place was packed with Allied senior leadership, including Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, Lieutenant General Omar Bradley, and Lieutenant General George S. Patton. Major General Kenneth Strong, intelligence chief for Eisenhower, had just completed an update on the German advance. An oppressive silence filled the space afterward. Eisenhower ended the quiet with a statement that would shape the American reaction. "The present conditions must be seen as an opportunity for us, not a calamity." Only upbeat expressions are allowed at this conference. Patton gave a quick grin. "Hell, let's be bold enough to let these bastards get all the way to Paris. Then we can seal them in and destroy them." Eisenhower adopted a grave tone. "George, I need you to launch a northern assault. How fast can you withdraw from your current push and head toward Bastogne?" Patton's following words shocked all present. "I can move 3 divisions within 48 hours. The attendees expressed disbelief at his claim. Air Chief Marshal Arthur Tedder even chuckled at the idea, shifting an entire corps 90 degrees, across 100 miles of frozen roads, within 2 days in the dead of winter. It seemed undoable. Eisenhower's face reddened. "Don't be absurd, George. Trying to go that soon means you won't have all your units at hand, and you'll break up your attack and suffer severe losses." Yet, Patton was not exaggerating. Over the past 3 days, his brilliant staff officer, Colonel Oscar Coe, had alerted him to increasing German activity in the Ardennes. Patton had already drawn up 3 alternate plans for just such an emergency. He had stationed reserves of gas, ammunition, and medical support along likely northern approaches. "I am not being silly, Ike," Patton replied steadily. "I've already arranged initial orders. My personnel are drafting 3 different routes. Just give the signal." He pulled out a map and indicated the proposed paths to Eisenhower. I plan to utilize Milliken's 3rd Corps. The 4th Armored Division will spearhead, followed by both the 26th and 810th Infantry Divisions. Our push will start from Arland, pierce ahead to Bastogne. Eisenhower examined the chart. The length to cover was immense. The forecast was dismal. All passageways were glazed with ice. Nevertheless, relief for Bastogne was mandatory. When can you begin? Morning of December 22nd. Proceed. On his way out, Patton contacted his command with their agreed-upon code play ball. That brief message initiated one of the most astonishing tactical movements ever achieved. In just hours, 133,000 military vehicles began heading northward. Patton's Third Army, totaling 250,000 troops, required a complete shift in orientation. Logistic stockpiles, initially staged for an eastward invasion, had to be moved elsewhere. 20,000 miles of phone wire had to be strung anew. Gun placements, calculated for one sector, needed full recalculation for another. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, leader of the 37th Tank Battalion from the 4th Armored Division, received his instructions at 7 p.m. on December 19. His detachment faced a 150-mile advance within a 19-hour window, battling through a severe snowstorm. "We drove blacked out all night," he later recounted. Tank leaders rode exposed, freezing, guiding their blind drivers. Some men dozed upright and needed to be shaken to stay alert. The demands on logistics were immense. Every Sherman tank used up to 175 gallons of gasoline for the mission. A minimum of 50,000 gallons had to be shipped for the division just to reach their starting point. Tankers ran without pause, many skidding into drifts. When a fuel truck stalled, men refueled tanks by hand with 5-gallon jerry cans. Master Sergeant Frank Carousel from the 4th Armored Maintenance Company worked non-stop for 72 hours. "We swapped tank track sections while vehicles crawled forward," he said. Soldiers' hands bonded to frozen steel. In some instances, flesh tore away when pulling loose, yet the work continued. Each knew the paratroopers in Bastogne depended on their effort. Meanwhile, inside Bastogne, the crisis intensified. Their defensive area had contracted to under 16 miles. German artillery accurately struck all major positions. Medical outposts brimmed with casualties. At 11:30 a.m. on December 22, 4 German envoys drew near American positions with a white flag. Troops from F Company, 327th Glider Infantry Regiment received them. The delegation included Major Wagner from the 47th Panzer Corps, Lieutenant Helmut Henker from the Panzer Operations Section, and 2 privates from the 9001st Panzer Grenadier Regiment. Major Wagner bore a printed ultimatum in 2 languages, English and German. The English was typed on a British machine with German accents inserted by hand. When the message reached headquarters, it went directly to General McAuliffe, then taking a short rest in the basement of a Belgian barracks serving as HQ. Woken up by Lieutenant Colonel Ned Moore, who informed him, "The Germans have sent some men forward requesting our surrender," McAuliffe instantly replied, "Nuts." His staff assembled nearby as he proceeded to read the entire German message out loud. The contents described the dire predicament faced by the American troops, stating that German artillery was prepared to obliterate the U.S. forces, and that only by surrender could they avoid total destruction. Colonel Moore inquired about the appropriate reply. McAuliffe seemed truly at a loss. "Well, I am not sure what I should say." Lieutenant Colonel Harry Card interjected. "That first thing you said would be tough to top, General." McAuliffe chuckled. "You mean nuts?" The group voiced unanimous approval. McAuliffe then took a seat and wrote the response that would achieve legendary status among the Germans. "Nuts." The American commander. When Colonel Joseph Harper brought the answer to the expectant German officers, they appeared baffled. "Nuts? What does that mean?" Harper could not resist responding. "It means go to hell. And another thing, if you launch another assault, we'll kill every single German who tries to enter this town." Major Wagner grew rigid. "We will inflict many American casualties. This is war. Be on your way, friend," Harper answered. And best of luck to you. General Hasso von Manteuffel, the commander of the 5th Panzer Army, would later acknowledge his surprise that the ultimatum was ever issued. The Panzer Division had sent an envoy to Bastogne without his consent. The order to surrender was rejected, just as he had expected. The Germans' response to McAuliffe's bold message came quickly and harshly. That night, the Luftwaffe executed its initial major bombing attack on Bastogne. For those defending from their foxholes, it was like getting a glimpse of hell. Corporal Walter Gordon, a member of Easy Company, detailed the air raid. The earth trembled as if from an earthquake. Trees went up in flames. Shrapnel tore through the air like furious hornets. We buried ourselves in the frozen ground and prayed. The temperature dropped to almost 10 degrees Fahrenheit. In foxholes manning the outer defenses, troops alternated sleeping shifts to keep from freezing to death. The men discovered it was safer to urinate in empty ration cans rather than risk leaving their positions. Being exposed for only a short while could result in death by a sniper or frostbite. Food supplies were critical. The standard ration was 1K ration daily. That was approximately 2,800 calories, while in such intense cold the men needed 4,000. They found they could save the waxy cardboard from ration boxes. That would burn just long enough to melt a canteen full of snow into drinkable water. Technical Sergeant Donald Malarkey came up with an inventive fix. We found that the frozen bodies of German horses there were hundreds provided fresh meat. We chipped off pieces with bayonets and cooked them over fires fueled by splintered ammunition boxes. It tasted awful, but it kept us going. On December 24th, Bastogne saw a day of both hope and terror. The skies finally started to clear, which boosted the prospect of supply drops from the air. However, that also allowed the Luftwaffe to unleash its most powerful air raid. At 8:30 p.m. on Christmas Eve, German bombers swept over Bastogne. One bomb made a direct hit on the aid station where René Lemaitre was working. The structure caved in, trapping dozens of wounded along with the medical staff. Corporal Kenneth Moore found himself outside at the moment of impact. I heard the detonation and ran toward the site. The place where the aid station had stood was now just debris. We could hear people beneath, crying for help, calling for their mothers. We dug through the debris with our bare hands all night, pulling out victims. Miss Lemaitre had died. She had remained with those too injured to be moved. That single airstrike killed 30 American troops in addition to the Belgian nurse who had come to represent hope for the injured. Augusta Chewy, a nurse from Belgium of Congolese descent, survived and worked non-stop for 30 hours administering aid after the attack. As Christmas Eve gave way to Christmas Day, Patton's Third Army was battling through snowstorms. The offensive that had started on December 22 was lagging behind. The 4th Armored Division had pushed forward only 7 miles over 3 days. Patton, known for his unconventional methods, summoned his chaplain, Colonel James O'Neill, on December 22. Chaplain, compose a prayer for good weather. I am tired of my men having to fight mud and floods besides Germans. See if you can get God to help us out. O'Neill was skeptical. Sir, that will require quite a thick rug for praying. I don't care if you need a flying carpet, Patton retorted. Write up a prayer for improved weather. That prayer was printed on 250,000 cards and handed out to each member of Third Army. Almighty, most merciful Father, we humbly implore you, in your great mercy, to halt these excessive rains we have been facing. Grant us favorable weather for combat, whether as a miracle or by chance of climate. On December 23, the day began perfectly clear. For the very first time in 7 days, the sun appeared. The change in the weather seemed miraculous. After 7 days of dense fog and snow, visibility extended to 10 miles. Temperatures went above freezing for the first time all week. Most importantly, the Allied aircraft were finally able to fly. At 9:50 a.m., the initial Pathfinder planes appeared over Bastogne, releasing colored smoke to designate landing sites. By 11:50 a.m., the skies were packed with C-47 transport aircraft. Exactly 241 planes, all in flawless formation. Sergeant Jack Agnew, serving with the Pathfinder unit, remembered, we set off purple smoke to indicate the drop field. Then we heard a dull growl that turned into a thunderous roar. The sky became crowded with planes. It was the most amazing sight I'd witnessed. The Bastogne paratroopers erupted into applause. Soldiers emerged from their foxholes, waving helmets, tears sliding down many faces. For a week they had been isolated. Now the sky was bringing support. The initial parachutes started opening at 11:55 a.m. The supplies began pouring in: ammo, medical kits, food, blankets, and above all, artillery shells. Out of 1,446 supply bundles released, 95% were successfully retrieved. Captain James Parker, from the 101st G4 Supply Division, organized the collection. Men sprinted through barrages to recover those supplies. I saw a private get struck by fragments, get back up, and haul a bundle to shelter, blood running down his face. The Germans were not passive. Anti-aircraft batteries set up around Bastogne fired at the planes. The C-47s had to maintain steady and level flight at 1,000 feet for the drops to be accurate. It made them easy targets. By December 26, a total of 1,020.7 tons had been dropped by parachute and 92.4 tons by glider. The largest airdrop came December 26, when 289 planes made the Bastogne run. At 2:45 a.m. on Christmas, German guns began their most intense shelling of Bastogne. For 2 hours, explosions pounded the American positions. Then, by 5:30 a.m., 18 Panzer Mark V tanks from the 15th Panzer Grenadier Division, joined by infantry in winter camouflage, launched an assault against the western sector. The attack was commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Wolfgang Mahler. He followed direct orders from General McAuliffe. Bastogne must fall on this day. It is the Führer's Christmas wish. The German tanks breached the first defensive line manned by Company A, 327th Glider Infantry. Private First Class Kenneth Hindress was defending the second position. The ground vibrated from the tank's engines. In the early light, they looked monstrous. Our bazooka projectiles just ricocheted off their armor, but our tank destroyers had been perfectly placed. The M18 Hellcats from the 75th Tank Destroyer Battalion were concealed among the ruined structures. As the German tanks rolled by, they unleashed fire from the flanks. Sergeant Bill Harper captained one of the Hellcats. We let them move past us, then blasted them from behind where their armor was weakest. My gunner, Corporal Johnson, was outstanding. 5 rounds, 3 destroyed tanks. By 10 in the morning, all 18 German tanks were burning hulks. Close to 400 German troops were dead, laying in the snow. One captured German officer told his interrogators, "Your defense was superb. We realized this morning that we would never be able to capture Bastogne." General McAuliffe shared his Christmas address with the troops, reminding them of the German surrender ultimatum and his reply, adding, "We have brought to a standstill everything that has come at us from the north, east, south, and west.